Because of my background as a chief revenue officer, I've been able to take that hands-on approach and at times say to them, listen, this is going to be overkill for the stage that you're at right now. But in 6 months, you're going to thank me that we did this because you're not going to run into those issues.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Campfire Capitalism. I am your host, Desmond Dixon, and I'm excited to have my man, Chris Roche, on the pod today. Man, this guy is probably one of the smartest marketers I know. I mean, you could just tell from how he breaks things down that are super complex in very simplest terms. And I'm super excited for you guys to get a lot of value from some game that he has here today. This guy has works with a variety of companies, increasing their qualified pipelines and sales efficiencies through paid digital advertising, CRM implementation, attribution tracking, and automated lead nurturing and follow-up. He's a huge fan of lead demand, keyword demand, and not lead generation, which I think is a super contrarian viewpoint of marketing, which is why this guy knows his stuff. So, Chris, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Dude, man, I can remember we first met, and just the way you was thinking, like the way you thought about marketing. I was like, man, and I used to work with marketers, like selling marketing. I was like, okay, man, this dude definitely hits different. So, just kind of give the audience a little bit about the background of like how Chris became Chris. What was your journey like? And we can kind of go from there, my man.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in kind of the startup world and consulting world for, nearly the last 10 years now. So I originally started my own SaaS company, which I grew out of college, scaled that, actually ended up going through an acqui-hire with that, and then jumped onto a software development company, which I, again, worked with for a couple of years, became a partner in that firm, scaled that to around $3 million a year, and then actually got to the point where I was like, hey, I can do this, by myself with multiple companies. And that's where I really jumped into Catalyst Consulting, which is the agency that I'm at the moment. And we specialize at working with predominantly B2B SaaS companies at scaling their marketing and figuring out their customer acquisition costs by being able to go through, sales efficiency, increase pipeline, leveraging best in tactics, demand generation.
Boom. Dude, so I think this is a super interesting topic right now because, as we all know, there's a huge contraction in multiples right now, not only in the public market, but also in the private market. And it's as we know, it trickles down all the way down to the guys in the seed stage or the guys who maybe have a little product market fit and trying to figure out, like you said, their customer acquisition costs and how to efficiently scale the company while not running out of money. So as you're seeing, so I have an interesting question actually. So as you're seeing a lot of these these SaaS companies that maybe had 100x multiple or 50x multiple, but now they might be coming down to earth down to, a 10 or 20x multiple, and they need to grow into that valuation. Mm-hmm. Like, talk to me about the importance of the customer acquisition cost, and should they be doing paid ads right now? Like, what would you tell a founder right now who who has to grow into his new valuation and how to control his customer acquisition cost right now?
Yeah, first and foremost, what we're seeing today with companies like Netflix having these huge layoffs is that there is just this enormous overinflation of valuations for a lot of SaaS companies. It's something that is not a surprise, but unfortunately now we're seeing kind of the repercussions of that. In my opinion, a lot of founders, when they get to the point where they raise capital for typically the first time in terms of the company's history, so they're raising usually between 7 to 8 figures. If you're going out and raising $3, $4, $5 million, a lot of the scale and growth of that company up until that point typically relies on either the founder's personal relationships, introductions from VCs, just straight outbound sales and prospecting, or press from, the fact that you've raised money. So you've never had to actually go out and figure what a proper customer acquisition cost is, how you can scale that, and what kind of marketing budget you should be allocating towards scale, how to hit those metrics, how to hit those targets to then get to that next round of funding, which for a lot of startups is obviously their goal. You go and raise $5 million. The next goal is to raise $15, $20, $25 million. And in order to do so, you have to have those metrics completely ironed out. And that's really where I specialize at working with clients, is VC-backed startups who are looking to scale leveraging paid social media to get to that next round of funding, to get to an acquisition, to scale to a profitability point, whatever that metric and that goal is, that's where I kind of specialize at working with clients. And it's very important to understand how you can leverage paid social media to do that and which combination of platforms make sense, because a lot of companies are misallocating their budget and therefore just not seeing the results that they want to from their paid ads campaigns.
Sick, man. And so how important is it in terms of, obviously we know word of mouth is probably still to this day the best marketing in the world because it's no customer acquisition cost unless you have an affiliate program or referral engine that's kind of growth hacking that through intrinsic motivation from the client. But so how important is combining, so talk to me about the dynamics of combining the word of mouth factor or the social proof factor with other people, like other people who are raving fans of your product, and the combination with paid traffic. Like, talk to me about the magic between those two dynamics.
So first and foremost, word of mouth is not just what people associate with word of mouth. So people, say, hey, word of mouth is, yes, I saw it, I use a product, I told somebody in a coffee shop, whatever else. Like that is I think the misunderstanding of what that term is. Word of mouth does not just refer to that. And when you get into actually leveraging demand generation campaigns and you're producing content at a high frequency, when people go and share that content outside of platforms, and when somebody watches one of my videos on LinkedIn and then they text that to their CMO and then that CMO reaches out to me, that's still word of mouth marketing rather than paid acquisition. So when we get into where I work with clients is demand generation, where we're focusing on the entire market of an ICP for a potential client. So if you're looking at targeting financial service institutions, for example, if we're targeting those, we're producing content that's going to be visible to those target customers of ours on a consistent basis, which is going to engage them, it's going to entertain them, it's going to educate them on not only what's available with our product or service, but how they can actually get in contact, the pricing and everything else to do with that, to the point that they may be sharing offline and we can't track that. We don't know that. And that's where, you're correct, the word of mouth is by far the best channel. I just think people need to slightly shift their perception of what counts as word of mouth. And it's actually a lot broader than you think. And then from there, you can really leverage that at scale by using social media.
Love it. So would you say that probably, based on, I'm a sales guy, man. I'm not a marketing guy, which is why I love having you on. So would you say that paid traffic is probably the best to use based upon a predictable response from the marketplace, probably from or something organic, right? Is that clear? Or is paid, talk to me about more I guess the experimentation, when do you know to scale the paid traffic? Where I'm getting at.
So typically there's two types of campaigns that we're running. So we have demand capture and we have demand generation. So demand capture is going to be your Google ads, your Bing ads. That's where people are searching high intent search terms and you can get them right at the point of interest. They're in buying mode. They're looking for a solution. They're solution aware. They're just not brand aware. So I'm looking for a demand generation agency. That's something, if I type that in and I then find Catalyst, that's a great way of showing how paid ads is very easily attributable. It's very easy to capture that demand just by hitting them right at that point of interest. The issue with that is that when you're working with, again, a lot of SaaS companies, there's only ever 2 to 3% of the market who's ever in buying mode. And therefore you can't scale a demand capture channel past a certain point because you start to have diminishing returns. You simply saturate the search terms and you can't continue to scale past that point. So at that point, then we flip the switch and look more at the demand generation, which again is creating the educational content and the awareness within your industry. And that can scale very, very aggressively depending on the size of your audience. In terms of actually being able to attribute leads and revenue and close one to the channels that they come from, attribution software and marketing is very, very dysfunctional. The fact that you just can't track it across. If somebody watches this podcast episode and then goes and submits a contact form on my website, there's no attribution software in the world that's going to accurately show that connection of somebody going through that. It'll simply come in as LinkedIn or organic search when you type in Catalyst Consulting. So if you rely on those metrics, you will start to allocate the budget in the wrong places. So what I preach and what I advocate for all of my clients is self-reported attribution, where you simply add a form that says, how did you hear about us? 9 times out of 10, people are going to give you really valuable insights as to how they found out about the company, what it was that resonated with them to the point of where they're actually going to reach out or they're going to remember the brand. And that allows you to know that the channels that you're investing in are resulting in a strong ROI, and you can obviously allocate your budget accordingly.
Man, that's fire. That's fire. I love that little hack on the contact form. Where did you hear? Like, being a consumer, I tell them, right? Like, oh, I heard it from a friend, or I heard it from Google, or I heard it from Facebook. Like, it's just something so nonchalant. It's usually at the bottom of the form too, right before you submit. Yeah, dude, that's pretty interesting. So let's talk about like the content creation part, right? Because you're a freaking ninja at it. Like, before we hopped on the show, I'm like, yo, man, who are you using to create your content, man? Like, I'm over here, I'm sending my post to my guy, like, yo, man, you need to step your game up, bro. Like, I need you to compete with my boy Chris. But so talk to me about like your content creation strategy and, creating those hook, like, talk to me, like, I guess, give us like the framework of creating dope content, right? I guess give us the juice, man.
Yeah, for me, it's something that I invest in for my personal brand, which therefore benefits the company. And that's always been my approach with it. It's called the founder's brand. It's something that, in my opinion, every CEO should be investing in their own personal brand to really drive results for the company. And if you're not, it's not going to hurt the business, but it is a huge disadvantage by not being a CEO basically with a personal brand and a social presence. So for me, that's why I do it. In terms of the content matrix and the way that I can produce content, at a higher frequency, at a higher quality than companies 10, 100 times my size, is because I have it in a very organized fashion. And that's why a lot of people that, when I get on calls like this and I get on podcasts like this, they assume Catalyst Consulting is 100 employees just because of the frequency and the size of the content that we're, distributing on a weekly basis. What I focus on is having the pillar events and the pillar long form content. So like a podcast like this is something where there is going to be between 8 to 15 key topics that we'll discuss in this podcast episode that I can then take and chop up and repurpose on different social media channels. I also record on a separate camera, more of a high quality version that I can use for platforms like TikTok, platforms like LinkedIn, and I can start to, add those engaging subtitles. And a lot of it is about repurposing and being able to set up a consistent framework to repurpose that content and then distribute it consistently. One of the biggest reasons that I think a lot of CEOs or founders who maybe start but don't necessarily follow through with producing content is because of the engagement that they're getting, because of the vanity metrics that they're looking for. When the fact is, when you're targeting something very specific, so for me, I talk very much about demand generation. You won't see me talking about too much else. My potential audience isn't 10 million people that I can sell to. So my videos aren't going to go viral. It's not very broad. I'm not producing the content for a very large market. It's very, very hyper specific. And therefore, when I'm getting 500, 1,000 video views on content, I know that that's resonating with very, very high intent audience. And for me, it's about educating and establishing myself as a thought leader in this space, which then allows me to, attract clients to Catalyst.
Boom! It's almost like you're literally drinking from your own cup, right? Like you're not only preaching it. Yeah, man. I
drink my own Kool-Aid on this, and that again is, to be honest, when I'm talking with clients about it, and I have a client now who we're very much pushing. Hey, you need to start a personal brand. We really wanted to invest in this. For them, they've seen me do it. They found me because of my personal brand. They already know the proofs in the pudding from that. So I've already blazed that pathway for them, and I also have an entire content team set up that I can also handle that for them as well. So they can just send me a long hour podcast video, and I can turn that into 25 pieces of content for them in 14 days. That's kind of the purpose with that as well, is that I've already set that expectation and really blaze that path where people can then adopt and follow very, very easily, specifically my clients.
Dude, now we're going to get into the business side a little bit because I love this, man. You're essentially creating the system, testing it out on yourself. And then you can I love Jeff Bezos turning, AWS from a cost center for Amazon into a profit center. That was by far the most profitable part of their business, and it's scaling rapidly. You can literally turn something that you're paying money for and turn it into a profit center. I think that's amazing. And I pretty much did something very similar with, back in March, I was looking at all the things we're spending money on. I'm like, okay, what can we turn into that's working really well for us and turn into a profit center. And I did that with pretty much a tool that I have. And so I love that, man. So talk to me about, let's go into the business side, man, because I think this is super important. So being an owner of an agency, also seeing the side of a SaaS company, you probably see a lot of scaling. You understand that during scaling, probably operational constraints are usually the biggest domino to fall, right? In terms of like the chips, right? In terms of like sucking up cash for liquidity to keep the business afloat, right? Paying vendors, things like that. So like, what are some of your advice in terms of like from an agency perspective when you're scaling, helping companies scale? Like, what are some common mistakes that you see businesses make that lead to possible implosions or going backwards, right? Because you're, like you said, diminishing returns. Like, what are some common mistakes that you see?
Yeah, a lot of the issues that I see with companies that are scaling really falls into the organizational standpoint. And this is something that I actually experienced previously on a previous company when I was in charge of sales and marketing, and we were scaling very, very aggressively, and the rest of the team couldn't keep up. And that was, for me, a very frustrating component. But with Catalyst itself, when I started Catalyst, I made sure I was organized for the stage that I've been at every single step of the way. So I had, my first client, I had entire project management software already ready to go, where even though it was just me freelancing at that point, I still had everything organized and everything was ticketed. We had this entire system, and I knew that wasn't a strong point for me. So the first thing I did was outsource that to the point where I was just breaking even on the first couple of months, really trying to invest on scale, because I knew that if I was able to produce content that resonated with the right audience, I was going to attract clients. And we've never been in a situation where we've struggled for clients because of that reason. We have a steady inbound stream of clients that want to work with us, but now we have everything ready to scale with that, where we can continue to scale without really having to run into those roadblocks. Now, when we talk about leveraging marketing for scale with SaaS companies, again, one of the situations that they run into is the CRM isn't very tidy. The documentation of the sales process isn't good. The organization of who's handing a lead, who's following up with them, even the sequences and workflows, it's not set up to scale because it's never had to be. Because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these companies have just been doing outreach, and if the deal closes, it closes, and there's no strategic approach with that. And that's where I take a very hands-on approach with very, very early stage SaaS companies, especially because of my background as a chief revenue officer. I've been able to take that hands-on approach and at times say to them, listen, this is going to be overkill for the stage that you're at right now. But in 6 months, you're going to thank me that we did this, because you're not going to run into those issues. And we're already documenting the conversion rates from, opportunities that come in to sales qualified to closed won. So we can start to predict those customer acquisition costs, predict those sales cycles, and then be able to build out a scalable pipeline to be able to increase that ad spend over time. And again, it's very analytical, and it's something that just, simply a lot of founders just don't take the time to do. And that's where, if you're a SaaS founder listening to this, I would definitely get into the weeds. And the biggest mistake I see is just lack of cleanliness in the CRM.
Dude, that's so huge. SOPs, especially when you're scaling, you have to obviously bring warm bodies in to handle the load, because you reach a cap with your sales team. And usually when the new guys come in, if they don't sync in that first like 15 to 30 days in terms of like understanding obviously the product, understanding the system, and getting comfortable and create certainty, like you're literally losing a ton of money and opportunity, right? Because that person might leave, right? Because turnover for salespeople are pretty crazy. So let's actually pivot to sales, man, because I love talking sales, right? Let's have some thunder and lightning here, sales and marketing, right? Talk to me about like the importance of syncing, because I think one of the hardest things is like that dynamic of connecting marketing, sales, and then ops, which is I think that the shadow, like that's the sexy thing that no one wants to talk about is operations, and like creating this harmony between all three, business units. So we'll start off with marketing, sales a little bit. So when you're creating this demand, this lead demand, right? These inbounds through creating amazing content or doing some form of, I guess, this broad form of word of mouth, right? You're bringing these people in. Like, how does that affect the sales process? Because that's a totally different sell than outbound, right? So talk to me about usually those, the sales process for people that have really good demand, who can, to inspire them to create really good demand generation. Let's give them a little teaser on like how this affects their sales process.
So typically with marketing and sales, typically they're going head to head because sales wants more leads, marketing wants to deliver more leads, the leads aren't closing, and you have this misalignment of, ultimately goals. Like marketing wants to get the lowest cost leads come in, sales wants to convert and obviously get as much commission as possible. And therefore, when the leads aren't converting, sales isn't able to do its job and blames marketing. And that's kind of the age-old story that you've seen with, general lead generation campaigns. A lot of the issues with that, it really dives deeper in the fact that most B2B organizations right now are far too heavy on their sales organization. They're completely overinflated. And this is actually going to be quite an interesting, I think, turning point for a lot of SaaS companies in the next 2 years. If we are heading into this recession, we've already seen that valuations are dropping. It's going to be harder to raise money, and there's going to be a much more clearer focus on investing marketing into channels that's going to result in a strong ROI or even, a profitable ROI where you can't waste budget anymore. And that's going to accelerate this inevitable change from lead generation to demand generation. And the way that allows sales and marketing to align is the fact that with lead generation, I'm sending leads to sales. I don't really care if they close or not. And to be honest, that's sales' job to close them. Whereas when you get into demand generation, the leads or the opportunities that are coming through the pipeline should already be solution aware. They should already be brand aware. They should already be educated on the benefits of the platform. And therefore, you should start to see that sales cycle decrease. The intent and the qualification of those opportunities that come through should increase. And therefore, it should be a lot easier to close. And it also means that as an organization, you can actually shrink the size of your sales team because you don't have to have all of this outbound and prospecting going on, which we all know is not converting anyway, or is converting at a 0.2%, opportunity from lead to close one. And that's really going to be the biggest shift I think we're going to see over the next couple of years. And this recession is going to accelerate that switch from lead gen to demand gen and allow teams to really align their incentives. And it's going to come down to companies that adopt this new type of marketing and this new strategy marketing are going to do very well. And those that don't are going to get left behind in the next 2 to 3 years.
Got it. So this is interesting. So let's bring this down to first principles, man. Right. So there is that cookie. So how does a company know that it's ready to create a demand generation strategy? Right. Is it product market fit? Is it a certain revenue number? Like when do they cross the chasm to know when they're ready to maybe start to develop some of these strategies and execute them?
So any company is ready to implement a demand generation technique. It really comes into how much you're able to invest, what your profitability is, your burn rate, and how quickly you want to see those results. Typically, if a client comes to me and says, hey, we're looking at, we've not run ads before and we want to, run a demand generation campaign, or we've been doing lead gen for the last 2 years, it's not been working. We've, we've broken down the funnel and we're seeing it's not working. Can we move to a demand gen? Or my favorite, when clients come in and say, hey, we've been doing lead gen, it's working great. Why should we switch to demand gen? And then I break down that funnel for them and we look at actually customer acquisition cost per channel, and it's crazy high and they didn't even realize that they were running not profitable campaigns. When you're ready to make that change, that is the point when you can start to invest in moving into that demand generation campaign. The hardest thing to do as somebody that wants to switch from lead gen to demand gen is be able to take the vanity metrics out of it, because you should be focusing all of your marketing around consumption, and predominantly consumption within the newsfeed, where you're not taking people to landing pages, you're not doing white paper downloads, you're not doing ebook downloads, because that's not driving real results. That's simply sending leads to the MQL hamster wheel, which your sales team is following up with. And that again leads more into that overinflated sales team. So for me, it's not a question of when clients are ready. It's, do you have the mentality to be able to sit back and say, right, we trust this process. We've seen this work time and time again with companies, and our sales team is either going to have to invest in their personal brand, which I would argue is a better use of any salesperson, is to be able to go and produce content, connect with people in your ICP, and simply produce content on a regular basis that's going to educate them as a personal brand. That is a better use of a salesperson's time than simply picking up the phone and cold prospecting, because the chances of you finding somebody that's not only in your target, answering the phone, being willing to talk, and in buyer mode has to be less than 0.01%. It's such a slim target that you're after. You're trying to really thread the needle with that approach. Whereas when you can start to get into personal branding as a sales leader, that again allows you to be able to educate the masses and really take your sales prospecting to a whole new level.
Bro, I'll end with all of that. This reminded me of two things. I did a certification a while back. Sorry if it's a little background noise. I'm in freaking Istanbul, and they run the speakers like every hour, it feels like. But so that made me think of two things. One was I love what I fully agree with what you're saying in terms of I freaking hate lead magnets personally. I mean, it just triggers me, especially like it just triggers me, man. It is what I used to sell marketing, so I'm very hip to it. It's very gimmicky, but I'm a huge fan of getting people to consume your content. It's almost like propaganda, man. Like it's literally like propaganda. All you do is you release really great content at the top of the funnel, and then you're obviously retargeting those people and staying present on top. And it's actually cheaper because your Facebook loves when people keeps them on the website, right? Like, and it rewards you for it, like by giving you, you pay less because you keep them on the website. And eventually, because I remember reading this crazy statistic, man, that then you can kind of correct me if I'm way off base here, but most buyers don't buy from clicking an ad and then buying on the spot. They buy from recall. Like, I remember this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking with, B2B companies that sell services with an ACV of $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. Nobody's clicking and buying that right there. If you're selling t-shirts, sure, you can do direct response. But if you're selling, any high ticket product or service, nobody is buying, like you say, on that click last touch attribution. When you talk about the advantages of focusing content for consumption predominantly within the news feeds of these platforms, yes, the platforms are going to like it, so they're going to show it more often, and your CPMs, your cost per 1,000 impressions, is going to go down. Secondly, I would argue it's actually 50 times cheaper to run targeted ads for consumption than it is to take people to a landing page, maybe even 100 times cheaper, because of the fact that if I'm sending a video to 100 people and those 100 people consume at least the first 5 seconds of the video or the first 3 seconds of the video, and I can see what the cost of that is, that means content is being consumed, they're aware of their product or service, and they're starting to be educated on my product or service or solution. When you require people to go to a landing page, you're talking about 2 to 3% click-through rate at best. So let's say 97% of people just aren't going to click. So you've got 3 people out of that 100 are ever going to click to there. And then most landing pages have a 5 to 10% conversion rate. So we're talking about absolute decimals out of the 100 who are ever actually going to download that ebook or white paper or attend that webinar or whatever it is. Whereas if you just run it in the newsfeed, you're going to see a far greater adoption and consumption of that content, and it's going to be a much lower price point. And when you're doing this at scale across all platforms, across your entire target audience, your ICP, you can start to see how this demand generation can really start to take over what would be a lead generation campaign. It's just you have to get over that first 6 months of not having leads to send to your sales team and being able to buy into this process.
Yeah, dude, you're preaching to the choir, man. Like, being a sales guy, I think as being a sales guy, I would love this strategy just because the solution awareness, like that by itself, and brand awareness, because you got to, like, all sales is trust. And for someone to give you $50,000, they got to trust you. And it's like pulling teeth, man. It's like pulling teeth sometimes in terms of a long period of time, like follow-ups, meetings, right? And then you got to bank on the fact, is this company going to be in a better spot or in a worse spot? In either case, that could be a good or bad thing for you. If they're in a worse spot, maybe they don't have the budget anymore. If they're in a good spot, maybe they don't need you, right? Which is fine as well, right? But this is fascinating. So another place I wanted to ask you, man. Oh, it kind of lost me because we went into the propaganda part. Oh, yeah. This is what I was going to ask you, because I thought this was clever, dude. I thought this was savage. I remember you first told me this, and I was like, all right, yeah, you got to get you on the pot. You were telling me that you're really big with influencers, man, in terms of like using that in your demand generation strategy. So just kind of unpack your mental modeling, or I guess your framework around influencers, because I thought it was very contrarian difference between way you do it and way we know people to use influence marketing.
Yeah, I think this really leads more to B2C marketing than, straight B2B. Yes, you could have, industry experts. That I think in the B2B space, an industry expert is really going to be your quote unquote influencer. So being able to engage those for, interviews on podcasts, for getting content in a B2B arena is a great way to be able to actually, bring influencers into it. When we talk about B2C, and with my clients that are running B2C paid advertisements, and we're looking at customer acquisition costs, one of the best content types that we found is, obviously user generated content. It's not new to anybody. This content performs well. It's performed well for a long time, and it allows people to have that social proof. People, it's more engaging. People want to watch the content, and ultimately it just converts at a higher rate than just a static image. Download this app, engage with this content, whatever that is. What we found and where we've had tremendous success is being able to target these micro influencers rather than influencers with 50,000, 100,000 followers, which can be quite expensive to get the engagement from. What we found a lot of success is targeting these micro influencers with anywhere from 3,000, 5,000, all the way up to about 10,000 followers is kind of the sweet spot that we found, and being able to have them and commission them to produce content for us. But instead of paying them to run it across their audience, which might only get seen by 10,000 individuals, what we've seen is that we can actually take that content, get permission from them, and then use that for our paid advertisements campaigns. And that's allowed us to drive huge engagement, significantly lower customer acquisition costs by, across different channels, because things like unboxing videos, things like, highlighting features of a mobile application, being able to show where they, rented an apartment, whatever these features are, that's been great to be able to show that user generated and really social proof. And it's a much more cost effective way than having someone with 3,000 followers send that out for, $2,000 a video. Whereas for $100 to $500 per video, I can take that video and I can blast that to hundreds of thousands of people very, very easily, leveraging these social platforms. And that's been something that we've had a lot of success, specifically on the B2C side.
Yeah, so using that mixed with the demand generation tactic, I mean, dude, you're saving, I don't want to say saving, but you're putting your money to work a lot smarter. And I'm guessing you'll probably use that user generated content in the middle of the funnel, probably, right? Like after they've already seen. Yeah.
A lot of it is, once they've engaged with previous content, once they've, visited the website, it's really that social proof. And again, like you say, my goal with any of my clients is to drive the highest ROI. We are a revenue and pipeline growth focused marketing agency for that reason. We don't do organic posts for people. We don't do blog articles, SEO, or any of that. Like, we're very much focused on driving revenue results for our clients. And now, again, this uncertainty of what's going to happen in the next couple of years, more and more companies are going to focus on how can they squeeze every last dollar out of their marketing ad campaign, and leveraging techniques like this has the highest ROI. Things like display ads, things like going to trade booths and conventions and things like that just does not have the same ROI of the techniques that we've talked about today.
Yo, it looks like we're both going to be in business if this recession hits, right? Everyone needs to make more money. Come through, right? We'll come take care of you, especially Chris, man, because this guy knows his stuff. So just real quick, man, if people want to get more, because this was great, man, it was a lot of dimes in this. So if people want to learn more about what you do, or learn more about some of the tactics, or want to work with you, I mean, what's the best way to make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, best way to get in contact with me personally is going to be either LinkedIn or TikTok. That's where I produce a ton of content. If you're looking to learn more, again, loads of content is going to be, distributed on that on a regular basis. And I assume you can put that somewhere on the podcast episode where people can click to that. In order to get in contact about, or if you have questions about working with Catalyst, just head to our website, which is catalystconsulting.services. All the information will be on there. You can see some of the clients that we're working with, some of the press releases, testimonials, etc. And then just submit the schedule a consultation, and we'll take care of you from there.
Boom, man, this was sick, man. Thanks for coming in, dropping some dimes, just unfiltered, all value, abundance, man. It was great to have you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Boom. So guys, you made it to the end of the episode. You just gave us your most precious resource on the planet, which is your time. We're externally grateful. If you're driving right now, don't go in the show notes yet. Wait till you get to your destination. But if you are not driving, then feel free to definitely go check out what Chris and them are doing. I mean, these guys are rock stars, and they definitely get the Campfire Capitalism stamp of approval. So we'll see you at the next show. If you want to come up, be a guest on the show, go to campfirecapitalism.com/guest and come play in the sandbox and have some s'mores around the campfire with us. So this was great, and we'll see you at the next show. Peace.